QR code on the table by Philip. Philip, raise your hand, please. And you can scan the QR code and you'll have access to our online report.
Check, mic check. Mic check. 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 Check, mic check. Check, mic check. Mic check 1, 2.
Check, check, check.
Done. Check, mic check. Mic check 1, 2. Check mic. Check mic.
Check.
This one.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon. So good to have you all join us today. And thank you so much for keeping time. For the people online, but are we on? Online? For the people online, we apologize for the delays. But we have everyone in the room and I think we're good to kick off. My name is Philip Ayazika. I work with policy. I think I've interacted with a couple of you through our previous projects, through the mental health project for creatives that we did sometime post-lockdown, post-lockdown. Interesting things that came out of it. And I'm proud to say that some of the inputs and the outputs and the products of the report that we are here to launch today, but also to discuss, was informed with the conversation we had with the creatives. I've read something there that, let me just get it. You want to get it right. Sorry about the camera people. This. So this specifically gave me memories of what the discussions were when we were doing the mental health project for creatives, which we did in Kampala and Jinja. So we worked with a couple of artists like Vodo Art Society that I'm seeing here, Bantu Vibes, and then there's also the Creative Tribe in Jinja, and a couple of other creatives there and artists. So specifically this quote says, and this is from one of the focus group discussions that Bobina, who is the lead researcher, who is one of our data and digital rights researcher, who is also creative. This is one of the quotes that came out of the engagement she had, one of the interviews she did. And it says, digital creatives, like other Ugandan creatives, are largely looked at as misguided and frivolous in Ugandan society in comparison to the more traditionally accepted careers like law, medicine, and engineering. Who wants to speak about this before we can get this session started? Who wants to validate this statement? Anyone? Please. Just take a second and think about it. I want us to validate this. And there's several other quotes that we picked out. You want to say something? What's your name?
So I'm Lona Okeng. Do I? Okay. Hi, so Lona Okeng. Can I just say it again, just to make sure that I'm okay? So digital creatives, like other Ugandan creatives, are largely looked at as misguided, in comparison to more traditionally accepted careers, like law, medicine, and engineering. I personally choose to disagree. My reasons are, I think we, I think we also fail to understand the history. Up. Okay. I think until we separate ourselves from like those titles, when you identify yourself as an engineer, or what you're trying to say is that you're separating yourself from what lies beyond engineering. Okay. I do not think there is such a thing as just the arts and the sciences without them kind of working together. Again, engineering draws a lot of its inspiration from the arts. There is no engineering sector, there is no technology without the arts. And the way I would actually put it is, the arts go ahead, the arts are constantly challenging engineering, and engineering therefore draws a lot of its inspiration from the arts. Now, when we box ourselves, traditionally the artists and the engineers were the same people. They were the same. Before we just kind of compartmentalized it. And I think now more than ever, there's even more interesting opportunities for convergence. I personally am a trained electrical and computer engineer. However, I never really identify that way because for me, engineering remains an art form. It truly is an art form, and it is just a medium to push the boundaries of creative expression. That is what it is. So again, you can choose to box yourself and say, okay, because I'm a visual artist, therefore I'm limited to what my craft is. But it's all about looking for the interconnectedness in this bigger scope of things. And to me, I think this is the best time to be alive, I think, as a creative, because then there's a lot of cross-pollination. You can be in banking. Right now, I think the financial industry is heavily looking at diversifying its investment portfolio. You know, well, they're looking at just moving from just projecting to the future of money, looking at art, visual art as a collectible. So then you're seeing that the banking sector then plugs in and works closely with artists. It's those kinds of cross collaboration that we really need to bring to light and stop the compartmentalization. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lona. I like that. Please go on.
Thank you.
Do you
Good
want to
evening,
do-
everyone. My name is Maureen Natim. This is quite low. My name is Maureen Natim. I'm a woman in tech, fintech, and so many other things. She reminded me of something that I'll never forget in my life. The saying that the adage that says there is no scientific invention without an artistic imagination. Every invention we see today started with someone's imagination, and the person had to have a visual picture of what that could be, the artistic imagination. So that is how I would agree with her. Then also, personally, I think I'm glad to be alive at this time in Uganda, where things are kind of like taking a storm. Everyone is waking up, and I think we just need to help the community understand that this is something they need to look forward to, and help, because it is going to require a behavioral change, a change in mindset, a change in the way people think for us to get where we are looking forward to. So it's an iterative process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Women in Tech. I think well said. You and Lona have articulated it very well. And I think that's a good start. Do we, as creatives, agree that it's a great time to be alive, first and foremost? Yeah? There's so much opportunity that is coming up. Lona said you have an opportunity as a creative, to do all the other things that you want to be. You could be an engineer, you could be, a creative. But also, I think when we go back to the basics of who a creative is, I think when we talk about a creative, when we're doing I think it's you. I remember you from the mental health sessions. Yeah? Yeah. The one you used to host at. Someone mentioned that to define is to limit for creative. As a creative, you can't limit yourself. And I know there's specialization, but as a creative, you're like the mastermind of the world. And you say, all these digital, platforms that are here, all the innovations and this and that, all these things begin with sketches. They begin with you draft. They begin with a wireframe, which is art, really. So I think it's safe to say we could all agree that whatever exists really has begun with the art, from history to what to technology. It has begun with art, right? Before we kick off for the online team, forgive us, you will see people keep doing this. It's very hot in here. But we are just going to move into the phase where we're going to introduce ourselves. But before we get to that, I wanted to just go through this. I don't know if all of you have had an opportunity to just go through that table. I noticed most of you didn't go to the table, so I decided to bring these things here and read them for you. But if you want a copy of the report that we are launching today, if you just want to peruse through it or skim through it before the discussion, or even, I think it would be great to just inform your point of view before we get into the discussion, so that we get the very best value out of this. It would be great if you can go there. There are physical copies, there are few, but then I'm seeing some people with them. If you can share, but then you have an opportunity to scan the QR code and get the digital copy of it. I want to read another quote that came from the interviews. It says, YouTube's payout rates are lower in emerging markets compared to those of the developed world, which is not fair. These are thoughts from the people we spoke to in the interviews, and later on, we are going to get an opportunity to hear more about what was the research about, what was the criteria of choosing the people we spoke to in the research, and really what came out. This says, in 2020, Uganda was ranked as the East African country with the most expensive internet. And I think as we are talking about digital creatives today, it's important that we address some of these things, or we speak about them, understand, share experiences, especially when it comes to the impediments that are existing in the structure of Uganda or in the economy when it comes to doing our work. People keep talking about the cost of importing some of the tools that you use for your work, the internet, this and that. And of course, someone might say, but we're going to talk about the internet, the cost of internet here, and there's no government person in the room. But I think it's a great step to understanding and realizing what is actually happening in the space, even before we can get to addressing the policymakers. I think I'll end with this. Right, this is what I've been talking about. This is tax on devices. Importing a phone to Uganda at the moment comes with an import duty of 10%, VAT of 18%, withholding tax of 6%, and an infrastructure levy of 1.5%. I don't even know what this means, but well. Importing a camera to Uganda at the moment comes at an import duty of 25%, VAT of 18%, withholding tax of 6%, and a 1.5% infrastructure levy. And lastly, importing a computer to Uganda comes with a VAT of 18% and a withholding tax of 6%. So these are some of the things that people, spoke about when we were doing the research. These are people's sentiments, these are experiences, and all the other thoughts that they had. Now, as we get into this discussion, I want to ask that it is as interactive as possible. You're creatives, so let us be creative. If you have something you want to say, please feel free to interject. We have an amazing panel or team of people that are going to kind of center and ground this conversation. Well handpicked, for lack of a better word, and I hope that they can bring value to this conversation. But I hope that everyone can get to speak out their minds and contribute to the topic that we're going to discuss today. I think let us use 5 minutes maximum to introduce ourselves, and then we can get into the core of the discussion. Is that good? Good? How? Pardon? Criteria for introducing. Be creative. Just tell us what we need to know. Don't give us an information overload. Just what we need to know.
Hi, I am Zen. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shari.
I am an imaginative creative.
I'm Shari and I'm a filmmaker.
Hi, I'm that Malcolm guy. I'm a musician and filmmaker.
My name is Vinny Emma. I do a little bit of videography and music and and writing.
Hi, I'm Michelle Keza and I'm an events planner.
Hi, I'm Vinny Massey and I work at Vodo Art Society. Yeah.
Hello everyone. I'm Puto. I'm an artist and a filmmaker. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Denesi. I'm an artistic overthinker. Yeah, man.
Hello, Lorian Intate, promoter of digital art and creative artist, basically.
Hi, I'm Sarai Jangolet. I go by the primordial M. I'm an illustrator.
Raymond Malinga, I make cartoons.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, Lona Okeng. I connect dots, honestly.
Hi guys, Jacob Mwesugwa. I make virtual and augmented reality applications for education and business brand activations.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maureen Natim. I'm a problem solver who is in love with tech. Simple like that.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, I'm Maytal. I'm a digital data and digital rights researcher here at Policy. I'm also a photographer, so I also kind of have both feet in the arts world and the technology world. So I'd like Bobina to come up here because I'm going to introduce the speakers today. So we're going to have a bit of a panel discussion where everyone is going to talk about some of their experiences in the digital creative industry, and then we're going to have a bit of an interactive question and answer session. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our 4 panelists for today, one of whom which is online. So anyone who is on Zoom, please introduce yourselves in the chat box. So first we have Raymond Malinga. Raymond is the CEO of Creatures Animation Studio based in Kampala. He directed a short animated film, Akalabanda 8 My Homework, that was selected in the festival Short Film Corner 2018, as well as winning multiple awards around the world. Next we have Dr. Tegan Bristow on Zoom. Dr. Tegan is Fakugeze, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, principal researcher and senior lecturer at the Wits School of the Arts, with a specialization on African art, culture, and technology. Bristow additionally acts as editor-in-chief and digital editor of the Ellipses Journal for Creative Research. They directed the Fakugeze African Digital Innovation Festival from 2016 to 2020, and now works closely between Fakugeze Festival, the Innovation Precinct, and the Wits School of Arts, developing research on the digital creative industries in Africa. Next we have Lorna Okeng. Lorna is a creative technologist and systems thinker with a deep interest in technology experimentation, committed to a career in Africa's futurism, cultural diplomacy, and new frontiers of storytelling. Lorna's work sits at the intersection of art, culture, and tech, with a focus on strengthening the tech and art creative ecosystem in Africa. Then we have our principal investigator of this work today. We have Bobina Zulfa, who is a data and digital rights researcher at Policy. Policy is an award-winning Ugandan civic tech organization researching the impact of technology and data on social justice and service delivery. In Bobina's role, she focuses on researching how to humanize emerging technologies and work as an intermediary in digital creative industries. So without further ado, just so we get right to it, I'm going to pass it over to Bobina to talk about the paper itself. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you guys be a part of us. For the online guys, can they get us? It's not cool. All right. Yeah, my name is Bobina Zulfa, and I work at Policy currently as a data and digital rights researcher. but I joined Policy at the start of there as a fellow. So Policy has a fellowship program that I joined firstly as a part of. And I was given the opportunity, I would say, agency mostly, to be able to do something that I was interested in when I joined Policy. And I jumped at this, at something at the creative industries, because it's something that I've been a part of. I'm not very comfortable with this microphone. I'm going to put it down.
Just speak loudly.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yes. So, as I was saying, when I joined Policy, I would just like to give a little background about Policy. Policy is a civic tech and work at the intersection of data and tech and society. So what we do is we basically look at data, how is it being harnessed to impact societies, tech, how is tech working to serve the societies or not. So a lot of our work is around, the harms and benefits of tech and data. So we look at AI, we look at online gender-based violence, misinformation, disinformation, and the creative industries is one of the things that we do, and particularly myself, that I've been researching since I got to Policy. And so that's how this report comes to life from my fellowship program at Policy. So I'll just maybe just give a little background of this. I thought my presentation would be running, but I don't see it. Yeah? No? Is it? I give it a minute. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Okay. So this paper is called Enduring Blindspots and Infinite Opportunities, and because really, as we get into the findings, you find there are, structural barriers that have just existed in this industry for like forever, and they've been enduring in some sort of way. And then we find also these infinite opportunities that could be tapped in, to just sort of realize, this the growth of the sector as a whole. Get the next slide. So yeah, I think I already went with that. I'll get the next slide. Cool. So this paper was really, well, I'll just give, from my point of view, when I started with this, it was just mostly, when I came to my supervisors, I didn't start off as looking at digital creative industries. At the moment, I was looking at just NFTs. And I thank my ED, Nima, who worked this journey with me, because at the moment she was like, that's a very small part of what's happening right now, and maybe it makes more sense to look at the sector as a whole. So I think in many ways she guided my vision at just approaching the sector as a whole. And so when I set out at this, I found there is barely any data on digital creative industries, And so what I did was set out to do a mapping. So that's looking at the sector as a whole and trying to find what's the reality on ground, what's happening at just across sectoral level, at every level of the sector. And so from, just that point of view, I was really interested in finding what are the experiences. So this paper is qualitative. The methodology is exploratory qualitative research. And so what we did focus group discussions with the creatives, some of whom are here in the room. Thank you for coming around. And then we also did key informants with other stakeholders in the sector. My thinking at the moment was, if we're looking at mapping the sector, I would like to take as many things into consideration that, I would say I wanted to attempt at a 360 approach at mapping and try to put everything that I felt pertinent to the sector in the report. And so I explored the report through 3 large, core themes, which are production, trade, and folk, production, trade, new technologies, and policy. But before I get into the core themes and just what was under those, there were just like overall sectoral findings that I found that I thought I should just share very briefly. So I'm just giving a very brief synopsis because of the time that I have. It would be great if you can go back and read through this paper, because all this is laid out in detail. Yeah. So for the overall sectoral findings, we found, for example, that a lot of the digital creative goods and services in Uganda are those on the lower end of production. So that means they're easier to produce. Videography, digital illustration, photography, music. And then there's very little happening on the high end of production, which is, gaming, animation, and the like. And we also, I also explored the gender perspective. There is very few women in the sector. And of course, we set out to understand why is this happening. And so, there was a number of reasons. There's limitations from, from the STEM classes. We find that from the lower levels of education, there are very few women who are in STEM classes. So naturally, we have very few women ending up at the end of the pipeline in digital creative industries. And then we also found role limiting, where there is the whole notion of, oh, women do this, men do this, women can do this. There was also the whole the pay gap, just a number of issues that we explore under the gender perspective. So that's just the overall sector trends. Yeah. So from that point, then the larger themes, the core themes of the paper. So under production, I was really exploring the production of digital creative goods and services. So under this, I was looking at access, use, human capital development. So with access, I was really just asking, we're just exploring what does access look like, and access is still a big problem, of course, because there is very little access. There is barely, most digital creatives, lack access to, these technologies to help them, in the production of their work. And so, no wonder we see the overall sector trends. A lot of what's being produced is on the lower end of production, because what is easily accessible are the easier to access devices, smartphones, affordable cameras, and the like. The issue of access, we also, there is also internet. Internet is very expensive. We have the most internet expensive in the East African region. So that also ties in with, it hampers production at that level. And then still under access, we explored, we looked at use, and we saw that a lot of the creatives are using cracked software, and no wonder, again, it ties to the, socio-cultural, socio-economic conditions, because most people just cannot afford, to, for example, pay for the Adobe suite on a monthly basis. So it's very expensive. So the subscription models are not very sustainable, and etc. We also looked at human capital development. So this looks at formal education, and most of the creatives formally educated in terms of, what they do. But we found most people are actually self-taught. And so, of course, that also has an effect on the production end of the work. We also explored access to funding. So we found there is barely any funding. There is one of the quotes here that talks about capitalization, which is happening with most creatives really are just, they have the capital that they start with is really coming from like personal assets, a little money from family and friends and the like. So there is just the finance is, there's barely financing happening at that level. And then beyond that, also the government, which should be a major funder of the sector, is barely doing any of that. It's not funding the sector. So there is limited access to funding. And also the foreign funders, there is the whole impact investment grants, where the grants are tied to some sort of conditionality agenda. So it limits, just the production end of digital creative goods and services. So, that's just really a brief of this, but like production is explored in detail as a theme with all the sub-themes in the paper. So, it would be great to just go and look at that if you're interested. Then the other larger theme was trade. So here we're really exploring the economic end to the industry. So here we looked at demand and consumption. What does demand look like? And demand is still primarily very, very low. And we see that, for example, the highest demand of digital creative goods and services or consumption is happening from media and advertising industries. And of course, that has an effect because, or something that we found as, we're talking to the respondents was, ironically, the people who are consuming these goods and services the most are also people who are barely supporting the industry. But that's explored in demand. We also found that generally there is low demand. Most people are not willing to pay for digital creative goods and services because it's looked at as a luxury. Most people just are like, we cannot afford this, cost. Again, it goes back to the socioeconomic conditions in the country. So that is all explored under trade. The employment sector itself, which primarily exists or thrives within the informal sector. So we find, informal conditions, or there is no, people don't have sort of, the protections that other formal industries sort of enjoy from, for example, governments and etc. So, informality, you see, for example, issues of pay. People cannot really bargain for better pay in the industry because, it's, there's no such thing as minimum wage or so. So that's really all explored in that. The paper is really, it's a lot happening, so I can't really go over everything in the little time that I have. We also look at fintechs and how they're changing, the whole the whole trade element to this, because they're opening up financial inclusion and especially mobile money. And then, just the last slide, I'm almost here. And then, yeah, we look at new technologies. Digital creative industries are primarily hinged on technologies. So we look at, you know, as technologies are evolving, how are they being adopted in the country by digital creatives in the country, or are they being adopted? So we're looking at primarily, you know, AI, virtual reality, extended reality, blockchain. And so what we really found is there is a surface level understanding of a lot of these new technologies in the industry. So even the people who are adopting them, for example, with the blockchain at NFTs, most people they understand this at a very surface level. And so in practice, you know, it's very limited. And then we also found just other limitations. Then actually away from that, the other finding was just most people are really just hesitant to even adopt these technologies, because they're like, I'm just trying to survive. How am I concerned about taking on NFTs or all these new technologies? And then again, all these issues of access, limitations in, you know, funding, etc. Again, tying with the limitations, because I mean, you can't, for example, with virtual reality, it's very expensive, just run as this. So how could most people, you know, just come and start working in the space? So again, that's just a very brief synopsis of the new technologies theme. And then finally, we look at policy. So with policy, we are obviously looking at the policies that are pertinent to the sector. And of course, here it's primarily IP law, you know, copyright. So we find that the law is primarily, it's weak, it's outdated, it's unenforceable, it's, you know, it's barely, you know, implemented. And so I mean, everywhere in the world, policy is literally playing catch up with digital technologies. But I mean, here we are like way behind. And so of course that lies on a number of key players in the sector, like government, and, you know, to sort of rectify that. But also we find policies which actually are stifling of the sector. For example, the tax regime. Taxes are very high on devices, on internet. And so you cannot talk about a digital revolution and people cannot afford the internet, or they can't afford devices, you know. So that is really all explored within the policy theme. Yeah, so that is really sort of a 360 exploration of what the sector looks like right now. And we just finish off with just a number of opportunities and recommendations that we put across. Some of them being, you know, investments in the sector from governments and other key players, private sector, etc. We look at the opportunity of investing in higher level production of creative goods and services, for example, gaming, because there is higher return on investment. So if you know, if it was being invested in, then there is more to be benefited from not just the creatives, but the sector as a whole, and even the economy as a whole. So I have very little time, and so I'm just skimming through this very quickly. It's a whole research. I'm just trying to go over everything very quickly, but that's really, I would say, what we explored in the paper, and you can find it all in the paper. But my final thoughts before I wrap this up is something that I thought I should put across before I finish my session, which is something I found very interesting. From last week, I attended the Fakugezi, the other week, the Fakugezi Digital Innovation Week, where I met Dr. Tigan. And while we're there, I attended something called a forum for intermediaries. So for me, that was very interesting. So intermediaries are really the people who exist in the space between the creatives and the audiences. So this is the whole realm of the value chain of the creation process, right? So you have from the start of the value chain, the ideation, you know, production, pre-production, production, distribution. So we have a number of people across that value chain. We have IP lawyers, we have researchers like myself, we have government, we have private sector, etc., etc. So this entire value chain approach is something that I thought I would like to, you know, put across for most people to sort of approach the industry when trying to analyze it and just try to understand just the sector's issues and trying to find solutions to it, instead of approaching just one area, which is, for example, maybe the creatives problems. And for me, this was very important, for example, looking at my paper, because I was attempting a 360 approach at this. And so I was like, it makes more sense to look at all the players in the sector across the entire value chain, right? And so then we're able to, you know, maybe just understand the challenges across of everyone and the solutions and etc. And so then, because you're able to push forward as an industry, you know, in using on more if, you know, everyone is being catered to, because things don't happen in like singular points. So take in consideration the audiences, the intermediaries, and the creatives themselves. So I don't have a lot of time, but that is just a very brief overview of the paper. It is available, it's open data. Please go and read it. I'm looking forward to your feedback, and thank you very much all for coming. And yeah.
Thank you, Bobina. I just want everyone to applaud for Bobina again, because this is the result of many months of work on Bobina's behalf. And as she's transitioned from a fellow at Policy to a staff member, it's been really cool to see how the data collection phase has transitioned into the dissemination phase, which is where we are now. So I think if you have any questions or comments, I recommend saving them until after our speakers give you a bit of information about their work and their lives. Because we want to have a discussion at the end that's interactive and engages with everyone. So I just want to pass it now to Dr. Tegan, correct? Who's going to be joining us from online from South Africa, I believe. So I'm just going to pass it over to her. I'm not sure how we're doing that, technologically speaking, but she's going to give us a brief overview. So over to you. Thank you.
Hello. It seems that I'm not able to, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Oh, great. I'm not able to share my video, and I'm not sure if I can share a screen. Oh, wait, I can share a screen. It's okay. Let me just do that. So it's so amazing and delightful to see Bobina again, because as she said, she was with us literally just last week, and it was really exciting to have someone from Uganda and someone who's just been looking at the digital creative industries in Uganda come to the festival and join us for the intermediaries program, which is part of the Vagugezi African Digital Innovation Festival. So I'm not sure if you can see the screen share that I put on, just sharing from my desktop.
Yep, we can see it. Thank you.
You can? Okay, great. Awesome. And it's also really amazing to see so many people in the room and to hear about digital creatives that are working out of Uganda and East Africa, because I'm also following the chats online, but I'm unable to interact with them at the moment. But just to say very quickly that the Vagugezi Festival happens annually, and we would really, 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 really love to see applications and submissions from Uganda. So please have a look at it. I think Raymond has worked with us before through the Digital Lab Africa, but he can also then just confirm that. So just to confirm what Bobina was saying, that I'm here really in the sort of role between Vagugezi and the Wits University Digital Arts Department. Oh, sorry, it's got my chat box up there. I'm just showing the website so that you know. But the Digital Arts Department co-founded the Vagugezi Festival in 2014, 2015, and we've been running since then. And our aim is really to kind of promote and develop the African digital creative scene. So please do join us. But Bobina was joining us specifically on a program called Moving the Compass. Let me see if I can just share this. Well, no, not like that. Sorry, the other one, that one. Can you still see my screen there?
Yep, perfectly.
Okay, great. Where we've, over the years of working on Vagugezi and sort of slowly developing, not even digital creatives, but also the discussion on what digital creativity is and can be for over so much time. We've also realized that there's a huge gap in what we're calling intermediaries for this sector. So there's a really wonderful support across the continent from mostly international funders for creators and producers, but there's a gap in understanding who the publishers, distributors, aggregators, festivals, expos, incubators, training bodies, industry bodies are. So we've been doing a kind of deep dive mapping into this, and moving the Compass Forum was part of this work. And our kind of initial findings were very much around the position that without intermediaries working to support the sector, it is it is not going to thrive, essentially. I mean, there's a lot of work, but none of it is really going to market. So we need to improve the quality and marketability of content, in addition to finding ways to aggregate and build digital platforms to secure copyright and collections infrastructure. So making money, basically, in order to support the sector. And then there's an infancy in intermediate roles on the continent. We're seeing lots of individuals filling gaps and taking on multiple roles. You know, you start out as an animator, and next thing you're also a publisher and a distributor, but actually really you just want to be an animator. So how do we grow this space to find supporting roles for the sector? Oh yeah, and just to say that we were covering digital animation, digital gaming, and immersive media specifically for this study, but it does kind of broaden across a number of different spaces, because the value chains of all three of those are actually quite complex and different. And we began to understand that the value chains themselves for those three sectors are really not well understood and have gaps. So a full understanding and optimization of the value chains for each sector needs to be established. So for instance, you know, a small example, like we know that the best games for African audiences are free to play and mobile, but these need to monetize through advertising, and yet there are no local advertisers listing ads on African games. So there's a lot of questions and a lot of work that needs to be done in this space. So lots of gaps, but gaps are always opportunities. So thank you so much, Bobina, for inviting me, and it's amazing to it's amazing that I've been, you know, so quickly talking to you. Here I am. Hi. So quickly talking to you, following the forum, and I'm very excited to see the Ugandan community building their work and carrying on. Very, very exciting. Hi, everybody. I can see my face now.
Great to see you.
The sun behind me. But I'll pass it on, and obviously if there's more questions about the work that we do, I'm happy to answer them in the chat or later on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Tegan. I want to pass it now on to Lorna Okeng, and I hope you can tell us a bit about your work. And I also really liked what you talked about earlier with the idea of cross-pollination in industry, between industries and art and technology. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm also really bad with the mic. Can you hear me better?
A little louder, maybe?
You can manage. Louder? Woo, that would be screaming. I feel like your mic is better. But anyway, thanks. Thank you so much, Bobina, for inviting me.
Try that one.
This feels better, or is it just my voice then? I think we're in the same scenario. But I mean, I think this is a very important discussion to have. Again, Lorna Okeng, creative technologist, really, and I really describe myself as, you know, somebody who's constantly looking for patterns and how to connect those dots. And I also say that, and just mirroring also what you said, that we're living at such an interesting time that we're seeing a whole, an incredible kind of space for convergence, that the silos are going to be broken. We're going to see a lot more cross-collaboration across different disciplines, yeah? So you'll see healthcare and fashion coming to the same room. You'll see finance and the arts coming a lot closer together. There's music and agriculture, you know, they're the very interesting things to then explore. But from this particular discussion, and a theme that comes out quite strongly is the systems, I think the systems thinking approach. The idea that the creative industries in itself really is really just part of a whole, you know, and we constantly need to zoom in and zoom out and understand how, you know, the CCIs and really the creative industry fits in the bigger scope of things, which is the kind of the global trade economy. And when we understand that, then I think then we are able to quickly scan and see those opportunities for engagement. But also secondly, understanding that the CCIs in itself is quite big. You know, there are subsectors, 13 plus, and it's just so fluid now that we can't tell the difference, you know, between, you know, what's film, what's animation, what's gaming. VR sits across very different parts. And but then also coming closer home, when you look at even just the creative industry, and then you layer it with the digital creative industry, that becomes another part. But then it's also a medium of experiencing, and it's also a medium of access, and it's just another layer within the parts. And I think the systems thinking approach comes out quite strongly from Bobina's work, but also Dr. Tegan's work with Fakugezi, is that we have to begin to see how we fit within the bigger context of things, but also most importantly, how all these parts are then interconnected. And right now, I know there's the battle of, where there's the battle of, as the creative economy, maybe we're undervalued. Yes, we truly have been undervalued, especially on the African scene, but then there's very interesting things that are emerging, and that's why we have to look at the ecosystem as the whole, that they're the ecosystem builders. I think predominantly focus on that. The ecosystem builders and the backbone are the artists and the innovators and the markets, but then taking it a notch higher, then you're looking at the ecosystem. So there's the ecosystem backbone, there's the ecosystem builders, and that's where the MoTIVs become very important, the communities become important. But another layer then are the ecosystem networks, and these are really I call them the bridge builders. They can be the gatekeepers in different spaces, but they can also be the bridge builders. So how do we move the traditional gatekeepers? And they're the advocates. They're basically the people who then help connect the backbone, the builders, to the policymakers and the people who then make the decisions that create enabling environments. We cannot work without the government, unfortunately. We cannot do that. And the government really plays at policy level. The developmental partners sit at policy level. But then you need a very strong ecosystem that's speaking to each other. Right now, we're kind of in parts. We have a very vibrant, I think that's non-negotiable. We have an abundance of artists and who are doing phenomenal work. But how do we then build more advocates or more lobbyists or more bridge builders? I think there's a gap. There's definitely a gap there. But those, again, once we have these kinds of discussions, inviting different people. I like the theme of intermediaries, different people coming into the space to really understand how they fit in the equation. And I think there's space for pretty much everybody if we just open ourselves up and try to engage. Again, there's a theme. I think everybody can pick that energy that Africa is going through a massive renaissance at the moment. It's just, and you cannot run away from it. And it's heavily going to be driven by our creative and culture industry. The conversation about the Africa Free Continental Trade is already happening. Predominant, I think the theme that comes out quite strongly, the sale of culture and creative goods, the tangible ones, the arts, the crafts and stuff. But then, because there's a disconnect between the players and the creators and the policymakers, there's no, the digital creative product or the intangible digital side of, or the intangible creative industry is barely represented in the conversations about Africa Free Continental Trade. So therefore, these conversations need to happen on a more continental kind of lens. What do we borrow from Rwanda? What do we borrow from South Africa, the work that Dr. Tegan is doing? What do we borrow from Nigeria? There are conversations about digital tax we need to plug in right now to really understand the exportation and trade of intangible goods. But really bringing it close to some of the work that I've been a part of quite recently, and tying into the discussion here is how do we analyze our data and how do we bring these themes to life, And recently, about 2 to 3 weeks ago, the Africa Extended Reality Report was released. And it was really a community-driven initiative. And why I find that work quite fascinating, because there were multiple lenses, there were multiple people who were really part of the process from the beginning. It was the whole community deciding to tell their own story, but also understanding that, hey, where's the data, Right now, the emerging tech space, which is virtual, augmented reality, mixed reality collectively, which is the umbrella word for extended reality. There's a lot of tinkering happening on a global scene. We keep hearing metaverse and stuff, but in terms of where is Africa in this conversation? And because these technologies have not been colonized yet, it's a flat playing ground. We have decided to take full control of the narrative, that we want to contribute to the research. We want to contribute to how we want actually to use this technology. And if you actually study some kind of the history of innovation and tech on the continent, you'll see some level of peculiarity of how African tech is used. Look at what mobile money did. Something that just doesn't make sense to the rest of the world makes sense on the continent, and things that cannot make sense on the continent, kind of vice versa, I would say. So mobile money came in, it allowed the continent to leapfrog. We went with dummy funds and disrupted the financial institution. Interesting to see what could then emerge if we jumped in now to the emerging tech space. So going back to the research findings, and I say this was community driven, of course we have challenges, we have barriers of access, infrastructure is still a thing, access to the equipment is something that we cannot ignore. Of course we have these challenges and we are not trying to downplay them, but something that we consciously try to look at were, what are those positive outliers? What are those positive things that could then emerge from this research? And we focused on those things. We focused on really amplifying the opportunities, amplifying the fantastic work that's happening. Something that, again, we cannot ignore is that there's a lot of tinkering, there's a lot of experimentation, there's just a vibrancy that cannot be ignored. And you're seeing it across different realms, cross-pollination, in all different formats. An easy thing, I think a perfect example would be, you know, Afropolitan, Afro Nation launched the digital, kind of in the digital Africa in the metaverse, trying to recreate, okay, what if we imagined our own continent in its true light and its true beauty? What would that look like? What if we leaned on our culture diplomacy and used the most beautiful things to export and advertise ourselves as a nation? So the opportunities are there, and the opportunities are absolutely endless. Looking at, I think, Raymond, the work that you do is absolutely fantastic, but seeing Iwaju, you know, in the past couple of weeks, really go up, the rest of the world is really looking for content creators, and the beauty about the digital creative economy, it is content-driven. And where is the content? I think the rest of the world has lost inspiration and imagination, and everybody's running to the continent. So Africa then, I think the biggest opportunity that the digital creative economy presents the continent is that we are no longer going to be just consumers of this internet. We are actually going to take full control of the next internet, and that is being content creators. And there is an opportunity. What we now need to do is lay the groundwork, prepare ourselves, and the thing that keeps coming up, understanding the valuation of creative and culture group. That's the part that's a bit missing in all of this. But again, I think, and my mind is all over the place, but I think the thing that really, really stands out is how then do we amplify those opportunities and focus on those opportunities, but also the issue of challenges. How do we come up with more interesting ways to innovate around them? Not necessarily, okay, we have data issues. Yeah, maybe the infrastructure may not be built, but is there what does a dataless internet look like? And I think those are the possibilities and the peculiarities that I would imagine could then emerge out of all of this. But a question that I also ask, and just to end this, is a question that I ask myself, for somebody who's in the innovation space, I always ask myself two things. We're constantly looking for solutions to problems. For me, another challenge then is looking at the possible problems that our innovations or our solutions then create, and then using that to future-proof the way we design and the way we innovate. So yeah, again, the digital creative industry, I think, is Africa's. The opportunities are there. It's just how do we really plug in? And I would always say reckless optimism. I think we already have that, but the connectedness, how do we prepare ourselves? Valuation of our intellectual property, that is key. Policy cannot be escaped, but we have to build ground up because I think for Africa, for countries as unique as us, we have to build ground up. When the pressure is really high from the kind of internal spaces, the government will pay attention, the rest of the world will pay attention. That's the Nigerian model. So I would definitely go with that route. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lorna. I really like a lot of the things you're saying, and I feel that it ties really well back to policy's vision, policy as an organization, our vision of a more inclusive internet. So if there's a more inclusive internet, then it can disrupt these power imbalances that exist between technology superpowers and then grassroots initiatives to level that field. So I think it's very important to think about, to chew on, to maybe think about questions you want to ask our panelists here. But in the meantime, I'm just going to go to our last speaker, which is Raymond Malinga, who is the CEO of Creatures Animation here in Kampala. And I'll let him say the rest.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I would like to start by saying that I represent 10 other people. I just want to say that, which are my team, who are in the next warehouse right now working. And I feel it's really important for me to start by saying that, and it's also going to lead into what I want to talk about today. Before I start, let me say thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to be here. And what I want to focus on is actually the human resource element of this whole industry. Because for me, one of the things that I keep on asking myself is, how are we going to scale? And how are we going to scale sustainably? And that's something that I have been thinking about for such a long time, and something that I would want to present here. And yeah, let's talk about it, right? So usually when I go out there and I am challenged, how do you scale? How do you replicate yourself? You know, I get a lot of policymakers telling me, let's get 1,000 people from the village, you know, and let's train them how to animate, you know. And I wonder, you know, is that the best way to grow our industry? Getting 1,000 people who are not skilled, you know, we skill them. How long will it take to skill them? What guarantee is there that they are going to still be doing animation in the next 1 year, 10 years, 5 years? And I have resisted doing that. And I actually challenge it. I don't know if I'm right, but we will see. So in about 2017, January, I went to teach at a design institution. And I was tasked with a challenge to improve the animation class over there. And I took some time to adjust the curriculum. Before that, they were like chucking out like 1 to 2, 3 students every year in their program. And I decided to come in there and say, you know what, instead of complaining where are the animators in Uganda, I said, let me go into a design institution and actually deal with this problem myself. So I did. And after about 2 years, I checked out like about like between 35 to 45, 30 to 40 students, you know. And I felt pretty pleased with myself, you know. I was like, I've done some good work here. And these were 30 to 40 people, let's just say 40 people, right? 40 people who were very enthusiastic about the industry, wanted to earn a living, wanted to fulfill their dreams by joining this industry, and I had enabled them to do that. But therein lay another problem, which was they have no jobs, you know? So I essentially unemployed 35, 40 people. And that really weighed on me for a long time. So I decided to leave the design institution and try to come back to my company and see what else I could do. So what I have been doing, and what I think is a very sustainable approach, is I'm going to borrow the motto of a school in Malaysia that I really love. It's a design institution in Malaysia that their motto is masters train masters. I really love that motto. And what we have resorted to doing at Creatures Animation is actually focusing on our 10 people and trying to get them from the path to, it's a path to mastery. Trying to get them to a point that they are actually so good that they can go and train one other person. And when I reach the people in charge, if we call them that, they say, but you're doing it so slowly, you know? I want you to impact 1,000 people at a go. And I'm like, yeah, 1,000 people so you can check a box in 2022. But if you follow up on all those people in the next 3 years, you're going to find that I wouldn't dare I say even less than half, I don't even know. Maybe none of them might be in the animation industry. And I know this firsthand because if you ask me where those 40 students are right now, besides the ones that I managed to employ, like 1 or 2, they're in my inbox, you know, saying, I'm doing this, I really want to do that. And what I have started doing is a more sustainable approach. What I think is a more sustainable approach, which is if I train 10 people to train 10 other people, and I train those 10 other people to train 10 other people, we have 30 people, right? And then I can use 10 of those 30 people to go out into the design institutions because I've replicated myself. And I think that while we look at things like funding, technology, I think that one of the things that we can control is how we impact the next generation of artists. And I'm talking to some influential artists in the room today. And I want you to think about how effective you go about replicating yourself and how effective you go about teaching another generation of artists how to sustainably teach the next generation of artists. Because in my opinion, the world will keep on leaving us behind if we do not find a way to create multiple me's, multiple you's, multiple use. And I say this because this is my approach to everything. When I get an opportunity, the first thing I always do in that room is I always say, how can I involve my people? And I don't care if it's 1, I don't care if it's 2, I don't care if it's 5, whatever, as long as there's one of them in there. And the reason being that I know the importance of, I have been blessed with an opportunity, but they have not. It is my responsibility as a leader to give them an opportunity that they were not able to get. And I was once challenged by someone, they asked me, what is your role as a CEO? It's one of the most scary questions you'll ever receive, because you all think that, these are fancy terms, you're CEO, you know? What does that mean in Africa, really, you know, right? But my definition of what I think my role is as a CEO is to put my teammates in positions for them to succeed as much as possible. That's just how I think. And regardless of where I am, what I'm doing, I'm always thinking about my team and who I'm trying to replicate, you know? And I have a very, I wouldn't say intimate, but like a close relationship with all my teammates. I know a lot about them. I know where they want to go. Everyone who joins Creatures Animation is asked a couple of questions. They're asked, what do you like to do? What don't you like to do? What would you like to do? And knowing this allows me to balance when I'm stressing someone out, you know? When I'm giving him some work he doesn't really want to do, you know? But like, it's if you're to take anything from what I'm saying right now, it's well and good to say Raymond is working for so-and-so, you know? But I wasn't going to mention this. I've been trying to not mention brands. So a certain film, right, that I'm doing, right? But the thing is that it's well and good when they say written and directed by Raymond Malinga, it's fine, you know? But my pride isn't in that. My pride is that there are 5 other teammates that have their names there, you know? And that's what I'll be looking for, you know? You guys probably some of you be looking like, oh, Raymond, this. I'm like, nah, that's not important. What's important is that these guys have that credit too. One of my most fond memories up to now has been when I stood on stage at the premiere of A Calaban Ate My Homework with 6 other teammates. And I said, these are the guys who made this thing. That's important to me, giving them the credit, giving them the opportunity, and making sure that they learn and replicate, learn from me as much as possible. I put them in positions to succeed as much as possible, because here's the thing. When I was in Malaysia, when I was working on, when I'm working on my film that I'm working on right now, what you see is that there's so many talented individuals, and I asked them, where did these people come from, you know? Did they just magically appear? Are they cleverer than us, you know? But then you start digging into the history. I'm a big fan of film history and animation history specifically. You go and talk to somebody in Malaysia. I had the great fortune to be working for a company whose leader was responsible for the renaissance of animation in Malaysia. And so I had a lot of deep conversations with him. And then I was explaining to him what Uganda looked like. what our industry looked like. Said, that's what it looked like just before we did what we did. And I said, how did you do it? And it's laser focus, you know? They say, we're going to do this, we're going to pick those 3 people and make sure that they're really good so that we can focus on the next 3 people and those 3 people are focusing on the next 3, right? And we basically compound our talent, you know? And for me, that's something that I want to, you know, we usually talk about technology and all this stuff, like, yeah, right? Technology is always going to change and evolve, but I think like the mental state and the mindset we have and our approach as digital creatives should be to replicate ourselves and to see how well we can scale our human resource as much as possible. And so, yeah, that's it. Okay.
Thank you so much. And where can we view your animations?
They stopped recording. Sorry, I'm not. So you can watch a Calaban Date My Homework on YouTube. And next year I will be I'm part of Kizazi Moto, which is a 10-part film anthology for Disney Plus, and I'm writing and directing for Uganda. It's a short film, but it's been 2 years making that short film. You guys better like it. I am proud to say that not only am I going to be credited there, but I managed to get 5 of my teammates in there, and I am happy to have just been given that opportunity, and I'm trying my best to see how much I can bring back, you know, because that's what's important for me. I don't want to always be doing my film in another country because it can't be done here. How well can I position my team and myself to make sure that the next large-scale production in the next couple of years is done here fully? So, yeah.
Thank you so much, and that's really exciting. So super stoked to see what comes out of that. So I just want to say thank you to all 4 of our panelists. They've given some pretty interesting insights, and I think the most important thing that we need to think about is that no creative industry exists in a silo. We're all interconnected. We're all here in this room or on Zoom together. And at some point, you've probably worked with at least 1 to 5 people in this room, if not more. I'm not going to assume, but I know I've worked with multiple people in this room. And so I think it's important to think about the systems that govern the digital creative industries and how we can best interact with them and move them towards understanding and connecting to African creatives, especially in Uganda. So I think after these 4 wonderful speakers, I'm going to hand the microphone to all of you. If you have any questions or comments for all of our panelists or particular panelists, this includes folks on Zoom. Please write messages in the chat box, whether it's comments, reactions, questions. Additionally, we're also passing around some post-it notes, thanks to my colleague Gilbert. And you can also scribble down some feedback or comments or reactions or ideas after this talk. And then we'll close after the Q&A session with just some reflection and if people want to stick around and chat, because we also have some refreshments. So whoever has a question and wants to start us off. Yes?
No, mine isn't a question. I just want to add to the applause that was given to Raymond Malinga. I came in when he was speaking, and he doesn't realize the barriers and the boundaries he's breaking just by doing what he does, and that philosophy of selflessness. I'm a Liverpool fan, and so Klopp, that's Klopp's mentality. Yes, never walk. So Klopp will always praise the players, and then when he loses, he'll blame himself. And I think I see that with you. So I really want to say I appreciate that.
Are you sure? Was he paid? Well, okay, I think that's really great. Does anyone have a question for a panelist?
Hi guys, I hope you're having an interesting time as I am. I have gratitude to all panelists today. I mean, there are people who are actually helping us push so many things that are invisible to the vast majority of people out there. Because and if we understand that we are interconnected, it's not just by what we do but who we are. Because when you realize that when you're working on a project, you're using human capital. So the human capital ultimately defines your output. The people you have on your team define what you're going to produce. And where Raymond says that he replicates a piece of himself, I understand and I feel him, because when you're trying to build a team, and they are telling you scale up because we need so much done in such a specific time. It's not just about how many people you have, it's about what it is you're actually putting out there, what you're trying to communicate. And because just because there's so much buzz around certain things and people think it has a lot of green, they start saying that train as much as you can so that you can do all these things, but it doesn't really work that way. And when he says that he's replicating one by one, and those one by ones replicate themselves, it's so fundamental. Because for example, if you're trying to animate something and then someone has to code it into an application, they're all interconnected, because one has to understand that when this animation plays, this string of line of code has to run so that it is replicated in this way. So it's interconnected, not just in the work itself, but in the lives itself. Because now, when you look at a person who's trying to push things in policy making, and people in policy making don't even know what is going on, you start finding people who are eager to partake into an activity, but do not have a specified direction in which they should take. So you end up with people who are so energetic about something, but they have no fallback, where Raymond says it ties heavily on him when there's nothing for them to do. And so you don't want to give people a skill and they don't have anything to do with it, but at the same time you need these people, because at the end of it all you need to do something. And you find yourself doing a lot of things, staying overnights. I know he does that. Staying overnights, you're doing so many hats, you become Popeye, you eat a little spinach and you gain some muscle. That's rock boom for him. But the derivative of what we need to do as a creative space is to realize that we are the same people, because in animation it's art, and then it's also a science, where Lona says that you cannot define one or the other. For example, I started out as an architect, and I find myself in animation. You start seeing that it's all one thing, but we just try to label it as this, and it gets worse when you go into the mass public. The parents just want their kids to have a good title to their name, and my child is a lawyer, my child is an engineer. But what is the essence that these people are trying to do out there? Because when you look at architects, I'm going to talk about architects a lot because that's where I am, but when you look at architecture in Uganda, you just see people replicating a house they saw in someone else's compound, and you end up with a lot of other replicas of one person's house. Yet it used to be about the art of how you live, because architecture is not just a roof on your head, but it is the feeling or the experience you get when you visit a place. And so when we disconnect ourselves from the arts and say that the arts are different from the sciences, it downgrades a lot of work that is being done, and it pushes us back, yet we are supposed to be moving forward. There's a lot of things that people do. I mean, when you visit places like Vodo, there's so many things being drawn out. There are so many artists pouring their hearts out into making so many beautiful art pieces. But in the end, you come to a person and you say, okay, I want this and I want that. No in between. So if they have no knowledge of in between, I'm not saying that they need knowledge of the in betweens, because the ends define the means. But I feel like people should really first understand what something is before making a decision on what value to attach to it, because in the end of the day, the value addition we are seeing is not just one person, but a whole series of people partaking in two activities, whether it is fintech, where it is arts, where it is, and you find that the people themselves that are benefiting from all these technologies or arts and whatnot are the people that don't even understand them themselves. Right? So
Yeah.
Please push this. I really do hope that we get an eye out there in our so-called governments that shall not be named. And we push our fellow creatives in the direction we need to go, because it's not just about taking something into goals of 2024 or 2040, but at the end it's the quality of life that the people in the country are trying to live, and what their hopes and dreams represent.
Thank you so much. I just want to give some more time for other questions, and also pose people with the idea that I know we talk a lot about policymakers, this so-called policymaker. Who are they? What are they? But there's also other stakeholders in the game other than the government or people in the ministries. We also have private industry. We also have non-governmental organizations. We also have the creatives themselves and the firms they represent, such as Creature Animations. So there's a lot of different people and institutions and players in the game, so to speak, that we have to consider. So any other questions? I'm going to start in the back and work my way.
Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Timothy Batia. I work with Bantu Vibes. Yes, first of all, thank you Bobina for this amazing work. Thank you, really beautiful stuff. I really like how you went across the value chain, seeing the problems across everybody from ideation to the consumer. So my question to Lorna and to Raymond, first starting with Lorna. At the start, you mentioned something about merging the two, sciences and arts. Yeah, it's not that it's one, but how it's perceived in Uganda is with a high level of conservatism. So, I think the main point would be sustainability. To speak to both of you, I think highlighting sustainability is very important. How can we highlight sustainability to the decision makers for children and people who are getting these studies, and show them the opportunities in the creative industry, even further in the digital creative, because it starts from that. Yeah, because having an engineer turned creative is different from having a creative who loves art and becomes an engineer overall. So the approach is tied to sustainability, especially with the decision makers at that level. So how can we highlight the opportunities at grassroots levels for people making these choices to be creatives, to be or orthodox professions that are more sustainable in these eyes. And then for Raymond, you talked about how do we scale. One thing I would like to say is, do you think highlighting the opportunities that you've received, like now you're doing for Netflix and Disney, do you think highlighting the opportunities that you received will encourage more people to take on that path and to take it more seriously as a sustainable path? Do you think highlighting those will be a good idea, and how can you? Yeah, thank you.
So thank you for those questions. Can you pass the mic? We're gonna have 3 more people ask questions. Yes, I see you, Malcolm. I see you, and you as well. But don't worry, we're also going to have time to chat afterwards. But of course, we have people on Zoom and people here who probably can't stay as long. So we're just gonna go through maybe 3 questions, have our panel answer, and then we're going to end the session, but we'll be sticking around for conversation and networking and things like that. So 3 more questions, relatively brief, please. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys, for the talk. It was amazing. Bobina, my question is to you, Bobina. You had like core themes that you pointed out as things that would be essential to pushing the creative industry forward: production, trade, new technologies, and public policy. My whole thought process about this and my question came from something that the lady next to you said about how there are all these games in Africa by African creators, but then African companies are not really willing to pay for ads on those platforms. And like for me, it was pointing to a bigger problem. It's like Africans do not consume African content or do not support African creatives as much. Like even in Uganda, even as like musicians, you know for a fact that the market is willing to pay for like Nigerian musicians when they fly here, but they're not willing to spend that same money on, you know, African they're not willing to spend that same money on Ugandan creatives. So it's like even if all these problems are solved, I feel like there's a deeper problem. Why aren't Africans consuming, you know, African content? Because if we do get like for Raymond like big production materials, and we get for all these people all these things, and then do the right policies, how do we still ensure that Africans are going to consume African content? Because they don't seem to be consuming it as much as would like to. And I don't know, does that point to a bigger problem, or is it just because the content is not at the quality it's supposed to be at? Yeah.
Thank you. So there's also an online question. There's someone who was asking a question from Zoom, so just for equity here, I'm going to read it out loud. So to Lorna, elaborate more on data consumers, and if we are totally data consumers in Uganda, and how can we get full control of our data? So that's a question from Zoom. And then we have 2 more questions from the audience, and then over to you all.
Yeah, so this question is mainly for Zulfa, Malcolm here, but also a little bit for Raymond. And I guess it concerns, I was very curious to hear what you had to say about kind of policy and what things could be done policy-wise to solve many of these problems. One of the problems you mentioned, for example, was how high the taxes are on technology, on importing technology, on buying technology, and how that makes things super inaccessible. And I think someone mentioned earlier about the opportunities that exist in these spaces to kind of facilitate creative work and to facilitate all these different things as also being ways to, also being career paths, as things that people kind of do for themselves, whether it's publishing or aggregating or lobbying. I'm thinking about lobbying in particular. When it comes to lobbying and interacting with like, whether it's the government or other interested parties, how does one incentivize them to do better or do different, you know? Because I feel like at this point, really, as adults, I don't think thinking about them wanting to do the right thing for people or whatever is necessarily the most mature really way to think about it. I think we really know a lot more about the way these things get done than, you know, on that surface level. So I wonder, how does one incentivize even those players to do better by us as the creative industries? You know, is it a financial incentive? Is it a matter of prestige? Is it a matter of saying Uganda will be seen in this way in all these platforms, whether it's Netflix or the rest? What are those incentives that actually can make a difference when it comes to those players?
Question here. That doesn't mean a cap on all questions ever, but one? Which one? Oh. Oh, okay. Let's do both of you, and then we will go to the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to comment on something that the gentleman talked about. The part where he trained some students and he said he realized he actually unemployed about 40 people. So I think the first thing we need to identify that we are all gathered here together because there is a problem. And there are also many other problems outside there, which forms the basis, which forms the foundation for every organization, for every community that comes together. But not every problem can be enterprised. Not every problem is a need that is needed by many people. I think we need to kind of do a research to see to it that we need to be able to identify the problems that are faced by a number of people, and these people are willing to maybe give exchange in terms of money or support to see to it that they receive this solution. So I think if as digital creatives, if we are to look at that, then this is a strategy or a way we could call for attention to see to it that this is something that can be scaled and adopted and endorsed by bigger entities, the government and other agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we're going to go to in the back and then back to the panelists.
Okay, I was wondering if I should stand because I was in the back, but okay, let me stand. Mine is not really a question, it's more about the comments that have been arising, and I'm glad that I've been invited here. I am a lawyer myself. I work with a law firm, but I'm also a director at Center for Technology Disputes. And as a stakeholder, because these are the works that we do, we listen to people in the tech field and know exactly what they do. And one of the reasons why we formed the organization and association is because we wanted to give a bigger voice. I've had the people saying the problems that we are facing as creatives, and one of the solutions that we found was having an association. Even in the legal field, one of the things that we suggest for people is have an association. Bankers, we're having a problem sometime, and they formed a banking association, and now they have a bigger voice. When the parliament is passing laws that affect them, they come out as a whole community and come and join in these discussions, and they are heard better because they are a bigger voice. So as creatives, I would advise that you have an association of creatives that actually puts your voice forward, because you as one person, you're only as weak as your weakest point. So one person you can't stand, one organization you can't stand, but if you're many, and many organizations, many creatives, you have a bigger voice. If they pass a law that affects you, or if you have some grievances as an industry and you want to speak about it, it becomes better when you're multiple and you're many. So that's what I would advise. But also, I am glad to be here and hear everything that is being said, because this gives us an opportunity to actually be part of the tech field. As a lawyer, usually, we always just come in at the point of, give us your money so that you can register your intellectual property, you get. But being here and actually knowing that there are other issues that are being faced by the people in the creative field, and knowing that there are very many blind spots and loopholes in the field that could actually be addressed. I'm very glad that I can be here and listen to all these opportunities and come up with ideas that could actually, where we could work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to give the mic back to our speakers and give them, unfortunately, probably not enough time to respond to some of these questions. So I think maybe about 5 minutes, and then unfortunately we're going to have to wrap up this talk, even though I feel like a lot of people would want this to go on for longer. I'm going to give everyone, you all, 5 minutes to respond, and then we'll have some closing remarks, and we'll have some refreshments, but sorry, no beer.
Okay, I will need just a minute or two. Mine is very brief. I'll start with Dennis's question. First of all, I would say that I said these were the core themes where I was trying to do a mapping of the entire sector, but it's not comprehensive. It's not everything that I would say is the issue. And so I think that's why I added my final thoughts, which was around, the value chain analysis of approach of looking at the sector as a whole. And so from that point of view, I would say, there is, for example, we could look at the other players in there who could, contribute to this issue of, for example, if we're saying that the people don't consume the digital creative goods and products that are produced locally. I mean, there is maybe a player there to look at. For example, there is the media. The media control a big part of the narrative. And so that's why it's important to look at who are the players in the industry across the chain. And so because the media have a big role to play in why is Raymond's Calabanda playing on our TVs? Why isn't the media playing it? So I think it's just I don't have something that I would say this is the answer to your question, but right now it's the best thing I can think about from just looking at the value chain as a whole. There is a player here who has a big role to play in terms of like changing the narrative and the way people approach the industry in terms of consumption, and that's the media. So that's my best response to you right now, but I'm happy to I think this is the beauty of the work that I'm doing, the research. It's, we're able to just open up more and more questions from, our initial findings. And then to Malcolm, very interesting question. I don't think I have a response to your answer, and it's a very tricky one, especially with our governments here. But I think what I would say is, what she said was, I think, very brilliant, the whole, bottom-up approach, because I don't know how to incentivize our governments in a way that will make them want to act in a way that supports the industry. I don't know, maybe they're waiting to see something happening and then they want to be a part of the action. Maybe it's us. I think something that's very important is we've got to work together with all the other creatives across the continent. How do we come together with the East African digital creatives and then African digital creatives, and then maybe the action will have to happen bottom up as of now. Maybe a more supportive government environment will come on over the years. So but I mean, these are things to think about. Yeah. Maybe they want money, but I mean, they have the money, so I don't know. So, but yeah, Thank you.
Thank you. The two questions, I think I'll start with the one on the kind of a complexity between, is it science, art? Is there some kind of blurry line? I would say, I think all systems go through some kind of a adaptive cycle, and we happen to be living at a particular point. And that's why we're seeing that, there's a particular skill set that seems to be most preferred. So maybe if you backtrack hundreds of years ago, there was a time the philosophers were the kind of like the top people. Nobody really cared much about the scientists. The Socrates and the Aristotles, their voices were most preferred. It was those people who gravitated towards the more kind of, what's truth, what is who. This kind of weird trying to figure out what is life and how are we part of a whole and how do we fit in and how are we, what's the story here? So the scientists at the time were actually quite sidelined, right? And now we happen to be living, and the times we're talking about right now, which I think most people talk about, the era of the engineers, the doctors and stuff. It just happened that we were living in this industrial age and post-colonialism. There were certain skill sets that were required to build this kind of Western society that we were hoping, the West hoped, our colonialists hoped to leave, to help fit within their bigger kind of scope of things. And so it was kind of literary and numeracy. So who could read, who could write, who could do certain works. The accountants were needed, the doctors, this modern medicine were needed at that point, construction. We're in this industrial era, and I think we are beginning to step away of that. There was that first phase of the industrial era, then the digital era, we saw the coders come and take over. Now it's the techies or the cool kids, yeah? Now we are stepping out of that era, into what then becomes, for other people, you're hearing a lot of the Web 3.0 coming, the economy that comes after the digital era will typically be called the conceptual era, and it's because of automation now. So the traditional coders and the developers, well, the past 10 years, everybody had to rush to code. It's still a hot cake, but now with automation, you're hearing a lot of AI, that almost all these automations will be able to kind of do pretty much what everybody else, the doctors, the lawyers, all those jobs could be automated because they're trying to study the systems, and then these algorithms create that. What these algorithms will then need, the new skill set that then emerges when everything is automated, is then wild imagination. And I think then the creative industry, the creator, and again, creative does not necessarily mean artist. Engineers are creators. Musicians are creators. I think we as humans are innately creative. I think we are all. It's just that our roles are being defined in certain ways. So again, I keep saying, you can look at engineering from a problem-solving perspective, which is traditional engineering. I personally chose to look at engineering as a medium to push the boundaries of creative expression, and therefore I found myself leaning more to the digital arts and finding myself leaning more into the spaces of the futurism and these technologies that are coming forward. But also, if you really try and study innovation, what are we building today? What do we consider mind-blowing tech? AI, we're talking about self-driving cars, electric cars, the internet as we call it. If you really study back, these were the predictions of futurists. Nikola Tesla, 1900, Uganda Agreement, we were signing the agreement. But Nikola Tesla was trying to create and imagine these possibilities. And what we're seeing today is, and that's why I say the art, the engineer, or the engineering draws a lot of its inspiration from art. And art is constantly challenging engineering. What we look at as virtual reality, extended reality, augmented reality today, these are creative works that mirrored in film, the metrics. If we're looking at the wild imagination that we see in film and music is what you begin to see come to life, because now the technologies are trying to catch up with these imaginations. Same as if you read the works of Isaac Asimov, you'll actually see that what we call as AI today, this interesting computerized thing, the idea of space travel, of humans being multiplanetary. When you see Elon Musk obsessing over trying to make humans multiplanetary, what he's trying to do is recreate what he was reading as a young boy. And if you've read some of his works, he's chasing this thing that he entertained him while he was young. It just happens that the technologies are now trying to catch up, right? And that's why I always say there's that interconnectedness. And now more than ever, we are seeing that convergence. Again, the skill set of the future is going to be multidisciplinary. And you cannot, I think we are stepping out of the era of the specialist and into the generalist. You're going to see the film, the animators who are medical doctors. Because even in his world, he needs those specificities, you know. And I think for us, we need to separate that kind of obsession and compartmentalization, just go with the vision. What is the vision? You will fit, I feel like you'll fit anywhere if you choose to step out of the bondage of a career role. I think that's me really. Then the other question came through about the issue about elaborating more on data consumers and if they're, okay. So this is the thing. Right now the internet, as we look at it, 99% of web, the World Wide Web, is the content that sits on it, 99% of it is created by 1%. Most of us are consumers. So I think there are like 2 billion users of the internet today, but most people are actually not really content creators. People are on the consumption side. But also what's even more disturbing is the persona of the 1%. You know, the 1% whose content sits on this internet. If you really scan through the web, you realize that it is a 25 to 45-year-old white male from, you know, Western Europe or America, okay? And that is even more dangerous because now when we're obsessing over AI and artificial intelligence and blah, 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 these things are training over certain data sets. So what that has meant is if it's going to learn on data that represents 1%, because we have people consuming and not really contributing, what does that mean? We're seeing issues about the ethics around this AI. Where is it picking its data from? But it can only learn from what is available, okay? But again, that was the design and the infrastructure of Web 2.0, the current infrastructure we live in. We're stepping out into the current internet as it looks like was designed for us to give us a service. We were going out to seek some information. It was more of informational. You went to look for Google, you went to look for information. The next and that's the new layer, is now the things are changing because, again, a lot of automation abundance. The card is swapping that the new web, again, future, the web that's going to be created, it is going to be content. I think it's going to be content driven and less consumer driven. And I think that's the model. The TikToks are now, you're seeing the Instagram, the Instagrams, you're looking at the TikToks and all these consumer, these creator-led platforms. And also that's why also the Meta is really shifting a lot. Interesting now, look at Meta as a tech company. They've rebranded and they said we're no longer a tech company, we are a creator company. And that the language of the new web is a creator. So we're going to have more creators and less like consumers. And I think that's the opportunity that this new tech provides for us. Again, it's transition because we're stepping out of a new phase into another. It's all about understand, and guys, I think that's why we need more futurists. I would say I really encourage if we could, work on our most pressing issues. I think that's fantastic. But if we could leave, some 25% of all of us to really try and build for these spaces, so that we don't get left behind. So I think that would be my
I'm going to be extremely short, right? Because I saw your eyes saying better be short. So I'm going to attempt to answer the questions with one answer, which is positioning. That's something that I've had to learn the hard way, and hopefully by answering it this way, I will save you some time. I think the most important thing is how you position yourself inside the mind of the person you're trying to convince. And the best brands out there do this all the time. Why do you feel like you need an iPhone? Doesn't even make sense if you think about it, but they position themselves in your mind as the phone you need to have. So why am I saying this? When you ask me, and I'll quote a government official when I was in a room after doing a presentation, he said, "But where is the money?" And instead of scoffing or like challenging him or like retaliating, I told him, you have just had a whole presentation here where you were talking about how you promote products and you're trying to promote innovation. And I said, each and every one of those innovators, when their product does not exist, they need me to make it exist before it does. And you see something switching in his head. He starts thinking about you as a person who is useful. And that's where the money is, And I think I will answer, my positioning answer goes not only to Malcolm, but also the gentleman here in Bantu Vibes, about, I think we should also position ourselves as capable of selling to a global market, not only local. And the more we think like that from the ground, the more we will be able to tap into the basket that is the global economy and not only here. So positioning, take that.
So I just want to give a round of applause for all our panelists, including the ones online. So can we clap for them, please? Thank you. So I just want to thank everyone who's here, again, and on Zoom. It's really great to see so many people coming out to celebrate a new piece of research. I just want to note that the physical research copies here, I ask that you leave these behind because we're still going to print more, right? But you can access it open source on our website. If you use the QR code, it will take you to our website. You can download the PDF for free, send it to your friends, send it to your colleagues, share it everywhere. And after I just make a quick remark, we're going to break, and whoever is available can stick around and chat, and I'm not sure which of our panelists are free to stay around, but I know Bobina will likely stick around for a bit if you want to ask her more about the paper. But yeah, I just want to end and say I think that there are a lot of opportunities here to create, as I said before, a more inclusive internet that looks the way we want it to look. If we think about the internet that we use today, it was created, like you said, by the West, by mostly white men. So how can people, minoritized groups, people of the majority, how can we create an internet with our own infrastructure and our own content? So I think that's just something to think about as we create and engineer and disseminate our work. So thank you so much and have a great weekend. Thank you. I sweat. Oh, no, I thought it was worse. My God. You, I was. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I had to cut you off. No, I love what you had to say.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I'm very glad that definitely looking at the work, because I just had no spoken to, with the
Recording